infrastructure and what is its role in building digital trust using use cases from other places. Please, with a resounding round of applause, help me welcome Biju Varis. Wonderful. Executive Vice President, Imudra. Please.
Thank you very much. So very good morning, Ghana. So thank you very much for inviting me. So we are coming all the way from India. So respected the DGs, Honorable Minister, the DGs, and all respected dignitaries from all the departments. A big namaste from India, first of all. So we are actually talking about a digital Ghana, and Honorable Minister have set the tone very right for a big leap towards digital Ghana. So I'll start with a small quote. What you do makes a difference, because this is actually on transformation. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. So this is actually a step towards digital transformation and a leap towards digital Ghana. So let us all stand together and progress towards that vision. So my name is Biju Varghese. I handle the business development and for the India and APAC region. And we have so many interesting use cases, and my colleague here, Jishnu, he is coming from the UAE, and he handles the Middle East and Africa region. So we'll actually take you through a small session, primarily focused on the use cases of public infrastructure. Because we are actually talking about trust, and trust is actually the key, and PKI, public infrastructure, becomes the key of providing digital trust. So we'll actually take you to some of those outlook, global outlook, and then the digital initiatives perspective, and then we'll talk about how eMudra as a company can help to foster that, the trust, because our tagline is trust delivered. And we also will talk about improving ease of doing business in Ghana. So, Honorable Minister has actually touched upon a digital Ghana. And digital Ghana is an all-encompassing vision and a plan, laying the foundations for transformation of Ghana into a digital society. It has three major functions. She spoke about digital transformation as a function, digital innovation as a function, and also enhancing digital skills and jobs. The primary objectives definitely to have a safe and inclusive digital transformation in all of those industries, modernizing the digital government services, support for digital transformation in strategic sectors like in the government, the banking, financial services, insurance, telecom, manufacturing, and all other sectors, project management and implementation support, contingency, emergency response in the country, setting up of cybersecurity agencies. This will definitely promote Ghana's position at the regional and international levels. So we'll talk about some of those global outlook, and coming to India, which is one of the very key region which actually helped or created the digital trust platform and shown to the world at scale. So there is actually a parallel. We were actually talking in the morning, and there are a lot of parallels which we can figure out from developing countries like India and Ghana, so that it will be very interesting to see how those use cases which we have done and implemented at scale can be replicated in Ghana. So we have actually started the journey in 2000 by having our own Information Technology Act, something similar to the Electronic Transaction Act in Ghana. So we have started in 2000, and we have established the root CA also during that year. And the first initiatives were being done by the central bank, who has forefront in implementing the public infrastructure in the banking sector. And they have enabled a certifying authority to boost the security in the interbank and intra-bank transactions. So we have been set up as a trust service provider or a certification authority in India in 2008. In 2010, we have the company law board, which has enabled the filing of the returns and when paperless completely. Income tax department when paperless. And during those years, we can actually see that various initiatives from the government has been enabled, like in e-procurement, the value-added taxes, the railways and other transport agencies who have actually made the ticketing completely paperless. There is a paradigm shift which has actually happened in 2014 in the country, where we have the enablement of national ID or a digital ID ecosystem. I will touch upon it in the forthcoming slides. And that has actually helped to leapfrog into a next level. Till that time, it was actually a steady growth. But after that, there is a leapfrog into a completely digital ecosystem which India is currently witnessing into. So that is called as e-sign, which is being enabled as a remote signing service. And remote signing service was leveraging the national ID, and which has created a digital ID to promote the paperless transactions. And it has also been part of a Digital India vision, which has been set forth by the Honorable Prime Minister. And there are various departments who has actually been coming together, collaborated together to create that vision and to fulfill that vision what the government was actually envisioned. So we call it as mission mode projects. There are almost like 44 mission mode projects across various industries and verticals. And there is a huge adoption in the banking, financial sector, capital markets, insurance, telecom sector after the advent of enabling the digital ID initiative. And now we can actually see there is a lot of initiatives which has been happened in the private sector. So let's moving on. So this I have explained to you. There is 3 different phases which have been established. And the first phase was always the initial phase. The adoption was very slow. There were no much of takers. The users were very limited. But there was a continuous process of educating the customers during that phase. But in the second phase, where as part of the Digital India vision, they have created the e-sign concept, and we call it as Aadhaar, enable the digital ID, which is connected to the identity verification system we call it as Aadhaar, and also aligned with the paperless initiatives, which has enabled a lot of industries to change into completely paperless transformation. And the phase 3 is actually happening right now from 2018 onwards. There are a lot of mission mode projects which I was explaining earlier, which has been into the police, the public welfare, public distribution, the social welfare, the passports, and many such initiatives are there. Also, apart from the e-governance initiatives, there are a lot of proliferation of those initiatives in the private sector as well. So the digital trust landscape in India is being divided into two. Information Technology Act, which is actually supporting these initiatives, which has giving a legal validity for the, as we call it as a digital signatures. This is equivalent to the physical or wet signatures. So that is the first thing which has been given. You also have the Electronic Transaction Act, in which digital signatures are given the same legal recognition as part of the UN law also. So there are two types of digital signatures in India, which is one of those conventional digital signatures. We call it as the conventional digital signatures, which are issued in a USB crypto dongle. And the second one is called as the remote signing. In both cases, the identity of the customer is being verified by the certifying authority. But in the second case, the identity is actually being validated against the national ID, and they are issued. The major thing, the transformation in this case, is that after the identity validation through either through a biometric or a one-time password, the user experience is so seamless that it doesn't require any channel in terms of a laptop or a computer is required. It can be done on a mobile phone also. So that is a major transformation which is being done. The user experience is that the customer is just entering his national ID and a password which he has received from the authority, and the transaction has already been done. So that is the advantage of using remote signing cases. So the digital trust landscape in India is that as part of the Digital India Vision, in 2015, it has been launched by the Honorable Prime Minister of India. The major things are divided into four, which I will explain it in the next slide. The physical ID is being converted into a digital ID, and there is a very significant change where there are APIs which has been exposed as open APIs, where any of the applicant or organization can consume. And using these APIs, it can be used for validating a person through an electronic KYC and create e-signatures at ease. This also can be used for e-payments as well. This has actually helped in creating a layered innovation, which has been which is actually transformed into mass adoption. This is what I was actually talking about. The base layer. So the base layer, we call it as the presenceless layer or the identity layer, which will be acting as the foundation layer. This is being allowed as a unique digital identity, which can be also used for biometrics or through one-time passwords or through facial recognition or so on and so forth, for identifying the customer, so that it is very easy for any of those form factors, just like a mobile phone, wherein a person can actually be immediately recognized. So the identity is validated, but this identity is automatically getting validated at the authority, the national ID authority, through APIs. And in turn, the authority will actually give an XML, a digitally signed XML back to the calling application, having the demographics of the person. It also has the photograph. After the successful validation, it will give back a photograph. It will also give the address, name, address, and other details digitally signed by the authority. Based on that, like a bank or a telecom provider or an insurance company or a government department can actually do a validation of the customer and provide any of the services online to the customer also. So this is actually taken to the next level of paperless layer, because once this identity is validated, the document can be automatically digitally signed, and using a layer called as e-sign layer, after the e-sign layer, which also supports the qualified electronic signatures, the qualified electronic signatures validates identity from the national ID system, and it is one step ahead. It can also be used for the cashless layer, where the payments can be electronically made. And on top of that, we call it as a digital wallet or the consent layer, wherein the documents can be securely shared within parties by the consent of the individual. So this is a layer, what we call it as the India stack, which has been part of the digital public infrastructure, where India is actually been proposing as a model for various countries also. So moving on, as I was explaining the Aadhaar as a digital ID, so this is a representation of a digital ID. It is not a physical card, but having a 12-digit number, but this has been issued to more than 1.4 billion residents of India. So you can actually see that there is a massive adoption of the system, because a person can actually, whenever a baby is born, also a digital ID is actually been created. But he or she will be able to use in a digital signature format after 18 years. But he or she will be assigned the digital ID, and they will be able to tag it along whenever it is being used in any of those applications. So the main thing is that even though it has not been connected as a physical form, but it is more from a digital form, where it is, as I was mentioning, there are more details in terms of the photograph, the demographic details, and also the address, and many other things which can be coming directly from the authority, can be validated by any of those applications. So also mentioning that it also having a two-factor authentication in terms of a mobile time password, or a fingerprint authentication, or an iris recognition, or a facial recognition, and many other factors of authentication. So by using that, it has been moved into the next layer. I was mentioning about the paperless layer. It's about the e-sign. So it is this flow which has been done, where the residents are actually wanting, let's say a simple example is that I'm going to a bank, I want to open a bank account. The person goes into the bank account, there is a bank application form which is available online. He or she fills the application form. By the time when he wants to authenticate, it just enters the national ID. The national ID, the data will be actually fetched from the national ID system. It will go back to we call it as the e-sign provider. The e-sign provider will validate the user. After that, the request, the data which is need to be signed, automatically comes to the e-sign provider, digitally signs and sends that back to the calling application. So in this case, the equivalent of a paper application form, where you want to physically fill all the data, then you need to do a physical signature, is completely eliminated by a process of maybe 30 to 40 seconds. That is the advantage of what we are actually thinking about a digital transformation. So then we move into the e-payment space. The same concept is being executed at that level also, where the identity of a person using, they are all having this national ID connected, and using that ID, we call it as a unified payment interface, wherein I have something like your email address, biju@bank1. That's all. So if I want to transfer to my colleague Jishnu also has an account in another bank, let's say Jishnu@bank2. I can just simply transfer the money from biju@bank1 to Jishnu@bank2. I need not know his account number or any other things. And this can be represented in a QR code format. You take the phone, you just open the app, the QR code will come. I can actually scan the QR code and enter the amount to be transferred. Automatically, my bank is transferring the money to the other account. It's as simple as that. This is enabled a very exponential growth in the digital payments, wherein the street vendors or any, we call it as the kirana stores or the push cart vendors or any retail stores have a QR code. You can just simply scan and just make the payment online. This has also been a massive adoption in the rural population also. Then come to the digital wallet. We are actually calling that as the Digi Locker, where we have the consent layer coming in. So the documents, if you can actually see that, universities have the driving license authority or any certificates, birth certificate, death certificates, or any of such certificates issuing authorities can actually connect it to the digital locker. The citizens can push the document also to the locker, or it can be directly fetched from or pushed from those respective institutions to the locker also. Which means that tomorrow I am riding on the road and the police stops me. He want to check my license. I just want to show my phone where the license is already there. They scan it and they validate if the document is genuine or not, because it is directly coming from the authority and not from me. And it is being digitally signed by those authority also. That is the concept by which this particular thing has been done. In that way, let's say a candidate, he has been passing out from one of those university. The diploma certificate will be automatically digitally signed and uploaded. He goes into a prospective company for a job. The prospective company don't want to actually take a certificate from him physically. It can be fetched directly from the digital locker and can be validated. That is the way in which, so this is what the vision which Honorable Minister was mentioning. The same way this can be currently been established, where the license authorities, the registration of vehicles, the universities, the courts, like that, there are multiple such institutions which are pushing their documents to this digital locker, and the citizens on other applications can validate also. So you can just see what is actually the scale in which it's been done. It is not been done in one or two numbers. It can actually see that the more than 1.4 billion digital IDs are already been, enrollments are already been done. This has been done by an agency. It is also directly under the ministry, and we call it as Unique Identification Authority of India, UIDAI. And there are almost like 1.125 billion e-authentications has been already done. There are 300 million plus electronic ID based bank accounts are opened. This is another big initiatives to go to the rural population. They don't want to actually walk into a bank to do a account opening or something. There are agents who can actually walk into to the customer directly, maybe with a gadget, just like a tablet or something, and they just want to fill the forms digitally, take a biometric or that authentication to be done. Automatically the document is digitally signed and pushed back to the bank, and the bank account is opened within minutes. So this is actually a big initiative that happened in 2016 to 2017, and more than 300 million accounts has been created. And the advantage of that is the subsidies which have been issued by respective government departments are pushed into these accounts directly. Now we can actually proudly say that those beneficiaries, there is no bogus beneficiaries, those from completely negated right now, and those benefits, social benefits, are directly pushed into and for the household people directly. That is one thing. The e-signs are actually happening. More than 600 million e-signs have happened. Digital payments have almost 300 billion digital payments are done. And as I was mentioning, the issued digital documents of almost 6 billion. So similar adoptions have happened in worldwide. We have actually seen various countries, something in Africa, something in the Middle East, something in the APAC region. Similar set of use cases have been done. Everything is actually coming under the same UN law. And Electronic Transaction Act. But the main thing is that we need to have the transactions, the vision which need to be done, and various applications need to be envisaged. So from a digital transformation perspective, what to do? The governments or banks or businesses want to actually do the growth, better customer experience, and definitely accomplish the operational efficiency. The major stumble block by implementing a PI is that the user experience is not so much great. But if you can actually see the way where I have actually told you, and majority of the use cases have been explained, there is no much use by the confusion by a user where they are just going into the same way what they have actually done the transaction in a physical mode also. There is no much change in their experience also. So this is what we are actually talking about, the e-governance use cases. I was talking about 44 mission mode projects spanning across tax departments, the civil aviation, the passport authority, the courts, the police, the municipalities. All those things are actually being fetched into, some of those terminologies are quite India specific, but you can actually relate it to majority of those departments where you are actually belonging also. So these are some of those government and defense use cases, very specifically in the direct and indirect taxes, from the tax filing or approvals in the company registration, creation of a company, approvals for the company registration or for creation or insolvency, in the foreign trade to customs, creating of those licenses, in the e-passport and immigration. You can always see that the issuance of e-passport, there's a use case which has been mentioned here. We call it as a national PKD, which is also being used by various other countries, and Ghana is one among the countries which has been registered with that authority. Application for the passports, approvals and all those. In the power generation and the distribution sector, the contracts between the vendors, suppliers can be done. In the land records, land registration and records, the electronic land registration, fetching of these electronic land records can be there. In the police, where the electronic FIRs, which is first investigation report, can be done, and police clearance certificate and conduct certificate and all, so many certificates are issued by the police, can be done. And the other thing is that once the FIRs have been, electronic FIRs have been done, this can be pushed into the honorable courts where the judgment can also be passed. So this is the cycle where we are actually seeing a lot of adoption in terms of this. You can actually see that way. It is touching upon various departments, and there are use cases very specific to each departments can be made, or this is not anywhere not limited to, but these are some of those things where can be definitely seen. Moving forward, this is a case study where a loan can be processed in 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. I'm just not exaggerating. This is a simple way. A user needs a loan. They have an app. They just come into it. The identity is validated. They are sharing the data. It is going to the app. They will just check for the marketplace where who is actually issuing the loan. The best rates can be managed. They sign those loan documents online by using the electronic ID. Then once it is there, they will just give their UPI ID, that digital e-payment ID. Automatically those people, the bank or financial institution can directly transfer the money through the API, and they will be able to sell the goods. So this is the cycle which can be done. The entire processing of the loan, even with the small payments and other things where the creditworthiness or the validation need not be done, but the identity can be validated easily and a loan can be disbursed in 5 minutes. Then this is actually at the scale where the e-diplomas can be done. The documents, the electronic diplomas can be actually pushed in, and the universities who are issuing those diplomas can automatically push it to the digital locker, and from the digital locker, this access can be made. And in the banking, there are definitely use cases. Coming into the customer onboarding, lending, loan processing, credit cards, the KYC, because that is a big problem for any banks. The KYC itself is a big problem, can be actually been done. The payments, the vendor contracts, all those things can be processed in the banking sector. So coming into the paperless customer onboarding, you can actually see it's very simple. Earlier, people need to go or to the branch, they need to walk, and they need to present. And sometimes what happens is that they need to get introduced by somebody else. All this can be completely managed. The ID can be done, eKYC will be processed, it will be fetched from some of those systems, data will be coming, it will be automatically signed and pushed directly to the bank where the account can be opened. This process can definitely take maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So many use cases are there, spanning from the retail segment to corporate segment, to the payments, to the compliance, to the reports and operations. So you can actually see every bank will have at least 300 processes where it requires physical signatures. This can be completely automated when the digital signatures and the PKI can be used. So there are very elaborative case study happened in the Middle East. This is a bank, the largest bank, where they are having more than 300 billion worth assets. And this is being holistically done by the bank. So I'm not actually going very deep into those use cases, but you can actually see other use cases also. Other sectors also, spanning from the corporates, the insurance, education, healthcare, telecom segment, and other financial services. There are definitive use cases where we can actually see, and this can be completely made digital. So which can actually, we can make sure that it is a will where actually takes us to this particular implementation. I'm not joking. India at scale is able to do this particular transformation in a span of almost 8 to 10 years. We have started this journey in 2015, and by now, there are majority of those use cases, including the banking, the financial services, capital markets, telecom segment. Issuance of a SIM card is very simple. Just go into, go to a store, fill in the application in the phone. They will just make them sign automatically on the phone itself, and the SIM card can be immediately delivered within 5 minutes. In this case, the identity is validated, it is already pushed to the regulator. So because this documentary evidences need to be done, and based upon the regulatory requirements, it is very much needed, be it banking or telecom or insurance. The regulatory requirements are there, but these documents can automatically be pushed into those regulatory systems at ease. So coming to eMudra, we are the market leader. We have IPs across various PKI systems. We have more than 800 employees, have 7 offices across the globe, and we are the CAP Forum member, Asia PK Consortium member, and been recognized by IDCs and Gartners, and the only company we have actually been done the common criteria systems or web trust audit certifications also. We have very comprehensive product stack, starting from the PKI systems to authentication system and to the workflow systems, wherein organization or a government services or a banks can completely validate and enhance their security posture. A whole host of very experienced people all across the world who are having the leadership position. And we have the various certifications from ISOs to SOC 2 Type 2, Common Criteria to Web Trust, and also we have been part of various industry bodies also. So we can help you with the regulatory framework, creating the ecosystem and the innovation. We have basically operating as a CA. We can actually see that it's a country CA. We also operate as a global CA and supports other country CAs also. So we have been part of those respective countries in the respective jurisdiction. So what we can actually do it for Ghana? We can create should be the vision for envisioning the trust ecosystem in Ghana is to have trust services. You need to have the solutions, and you need to enable these applications. So if you can actually see the trust services, you can run the trust services for the government users, other end customers. Then from the solutions perspective, need to build, operate, and manage the solutions for the paperless office and authentication systems, and create the e-signing documents through the eKYC. And all the applications, whatever we are talking about, need to be enabled. So should be the engagement model, need to run the thought leadership, need to have the technology hand-holding, and need to have the takeoff. So for that, what you require is you need to have the trust services, need to be enabled. You need to have the root CAs, the government CAs, or other service providers who are supporting this system, and also leverage the global trust if you require it to be web trust audited. And you need to create the solutions for the paperless and authentication. You need to have trained local resources who can support these activities and explore the use cases across those industries. In that way, you will be able to take those vision from whatever we have actually discussed about having into the Digital Ghana initiatives. Thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you very much. If I could crave your indulgence for just a minute or two, could you all pick up your phones, please? Please pick up your phones. You can log into any social media page, Twitter, or whatever else accounts that you have. And just type the simple sentence, trust is good. Trust is good. I am ready to hold the institutions I trust accountable. Please say that again. Trust is good. I am ready to hold the institutions I trust accountable. And then add this hashtag, hashtag National ICT Week. And then go ahead and post it. And anything else you want to say about the conference, just make sure you hashtag National ICT Week so we can create a buzz around what it is that we're creating here. Thank you so much for posting. And DG Rich, are we going to give any prizes for whoever posts the most? Do we have something for them? We do. Okay. All right. So we'll let you know. Just keep posting. We'll get in touch with you, and you'll get something special. So what are your rights within a trust environment, and how do you hold those who you trust accountable? And what is the roadmap to deepening trust? Please help me welcome Abigail Tibwa Yeboah, who's the head of Operations Data Protection Commission, as she touches on trust versus privacy. Please, a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to us all, the DG of NITA, and also a board member of the Data Protection Commission, and all protocols observed. I bring you warm compliments from the Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission, and I'm honored to be here to make this presentation on trust versus privacy. Since morning, a lot of engagement. We've heard a lot concerning trust. We've heard a lot concerning the digital ecosystem. So I'll go straight to the business of the day so that we can finish early. And during the break, I had some colleagues hijacking me that how many minutes for your presentation? I said, because of you, I'll just cut short so many things so that we can progress. The Data Protection Commission is empowered by the Data Protection Act 2012 at 843 to ensure the accountable processing of individual personal data. And when we look at processing encompasses a lot. We are looking at the data life cycle. We are looking at the collection stage. When the DG of cybersecurity was talking, he was saying that even within the government space, he still receives papers to be signed and all that. So at the Data Protection Commission, protecting the privacy rights of the individual and their personal data, we are looking at data that is collected manually. We are looking at data that is also collected digitally. We are looking at the storage system. We are also looking at transmission, transferring. We are looking at archiving. Even at the end of the data life cycle, we are looking at how the data is purged off. If we have to clear the data off our system, how is purged off from our system? So that is what the data life cycle encompasses. Please, can you take us straight to the roadmap to building trust so that we can move ahead? I forwarded my presentation. Wow, I gave it to Sewa. Oh, that's quite unfortunate. But I didn't also bring my laptop. But off head, since I made the slides, I can say something off head. Yes, it proves that I made the slides myself. So at the Data Protection Commission, we are working around 3 T's, looking at the principles governing data protection and privacy. Right now, we know that data is a valuable asset within the digital space, within the digital economy. And there's this school of thought, people are saying data is the new oxygen. Others are saying data is the new oil. And others are even saying that since data is the new oxygen, then privacy is the new climate change. So let's see if those school of thoughts are right. So within the data protection ecosystem, we are looking at the commission, we look at 3 T's, that is 3 frameworks that we look on when we are looking at building trust or even a digitized ecosystem, looking at transformation within the digitized ecosystem. So when we say trust, we don't look at trust like it's something that we confer on an institution or on an individual. We are looking at building trust from the foundation. I can only trust you when I can see that there are certain measures you put in place where I can just be comfortable in trusting what product or services that you are giving me. This morning when we came here, we were asked to register. I was confident and comfortable in registering because I have come. NITA is a regulator. The system that was here, I was just there myself and I was keying in the right data or my information into the system. And I have that trust subconsciously that NITA is going to use that information that they've gathered from me appropriately and they are going to use it well. So at the Data Protection Commission, the 3 T's that we work with is transparency, and we build trust before we look at the transformation within the ecosystem. And when we say transparency, we are talking about openness. What is openness? You should be able, a data controller, that is an institution that processes or determines what to be done with a set of data. A data controller should be able to have a legitimate grounds for processing my personal data. When we came here, our information was taken. There is a legitimate grounds because I have come here and I'm participating in the National ICT Week. Likewise, when I go to any hospital, there is a legitimate grounds for collecting my data and processing it because at the end of the day, I'm going to receive healthcare services. So wherever there is a processing of information or personal data, we know that at the end of the day, we will be a recipient or we will receive certain services from the information or from our data that we are given. And the data that we are given, we are expecting that the controller, there's a legitimate grounds, as I have said, and is going to be used for the purpose for which it's being collected. That is looking at the compatibility of the processing. There should be specification of purpose. There is a specific purpose for the collection of the data and for the processing of mine data. And if the data is going to be repurposed for another thing, that's processing for the general good, processing for my own general good, then I'm expecting my controller or the data controller to inform me adequately in a language that I understand, in a clear and explicit language where I will give my consent to further processing my personal data for my general good, that is processing for general good. So when it comes to transparency, we are, and in building trust, we are looking at those mechanisms put in place to ensure that trust is built. And with transparency, we are also looking at within the digital ecosystem, we are looking at building a framework or a digital ecosystem at the intersection of people, at the intersection of processes, and at the intersection of technology. People here means that even if decision making is to be based on the data that is collected, at the end of the day, the decision making should benefit me, the data subject. So yes, thank you very much. So here, people, it should be a people-centered approach. There should be inclusion when it comes to the processing of my data. And here we will go to the data subjects' rights, but let's concentrate on the people first. People. So my information that you are taking, I know that at the end of the day, it should benefit me. It shouldn't cause stress. It shouldn't cause harm, because my privacy is also related to my fundamental human right. And when we look at processes is what kind of organizational measures are we putting in place to ensure the integrity of the data that an institution holds. Processes, we are looking at even the administrative measures, what kind of policies, what kind of frameworks that the institution puts in place. On the need-to-know basis, is an HR file available for any other member or any other person from a different department to know or have access to? When we are looking at saving, it's like the physical storage. What kind of files or manual system have been put in place to store the data? When we are looking at technology, what kind of training have we even given? Are we even giving to our staff to be able to handle the technology that is available to them? There is this saying that a very good technology, a highly equipped technology, can be sabotaged or compromised by a negligent staff or lack of administrative procedures in handling those. Who is checking or who is overseeing to ensuring that the technology is used for the right purposes and is used for in the right way? Please, let's go back to yes. So when we've been able to have a transparent ecosystem, we've been able to be open to our data subject, we've been able to put in that technical and organizational measures. That is where we are building the trust. So here from the transparency, taking into consideration the people that we deal with, even our stakeholders, our staff in the commission, or our staff in our various institutions, the organizational measures that we put in place, and the right technology to help us in the processing of the individual's personal data. That is where we are building our trust. So can you skip us and take us to the rights of the individuals? Within the Data Protection Act, we have certain rights that is conferred on data subjects. So whilst we are looking at institutions being accountable to the Data Protection Act, we are also looking at empowering data subjects to be aware of their rights and how they can exercise these rights. If you are not aware of your rights, there is no way you can exercise those rights. So we are looking at the right to be informed. When I was talking about transparency and I said openness, I have the right to be informed as to why you are taking such a data from me and what you are going to use the data for. And here, the right to be informed, we are looking at privacy statements and privacy notices. Sometimes you'll be dealing with an institution, they will develop a privacy statement, and because they want to confuse you, and because they want you to not be encouraged to even read it, it will be even in smaller font and to be so plenty. And since we just want to go ahead and using that service, we just click OK and move on without actually going into details to read what it entails, not knowing that we are even committing ourselves to certain things that at the end of the day we can't even align with, or when we were able to go through to read it well, we would have clearly objected to it. But because it's in that smaller font, we just escape. Thank you. Because it's that smaller font, we just escape it. But it's the right of the data subject to be informed what you are using my data for, how are you going to store it, even if you are going to repurpose it for another thing, how is it going to be compatible with the initial purposes of collection, and also if it has to be discarded from your system, how are you going to take it, or how are you going to amend it? The right to amend or rectification. So as part of the data protection principles, we have the principle where the data should be accurate, the data should be up to date, and the data, my data should be correct. So when there's an information about me, because when you are looking at personal data and I'm the data subject, that means that that personal data uniquely identifies me as an individual. It uniquely identifies me. So if the information that is supposed to uniquely identify me is wrong, then I have the right to make you to amend it or to rectify it so that it can identify me as the data subject. And I have the right to object. Yes, so sometimes you enter into a transaction and know that the purpose of collecting my data, I actually don't agree with it. So I have the right to object and to prevent you from further processing my personal data. We are looking at the right to access personal information. Yes, this is something that we mostly get certain letters from certain institutions. They say certain individuals. They say, "Oh, I wanted my information. I wrote to maybe this institution hold my information, and they are not willing to give me the kind of information that they hold concerning me." That is the right to access personal information. It's an individual's right that is enshrined in the Data Protection Act, and that individual has the right to exercise that right. That information. I gave my information this morning when I came here. I can go back to NITA and say that the information that I gave this morning, I want to access it. I want to have access to it. Maybe when I was typing, I made some errors. I want to access it and make sure that it's the right information that you hold about me. The right to give and withdraw consent. Yes, so as I was looking at transparency, going back to transparency, because it's through transparency, having the technical and organizational measures, that is where we can develop the trust. Because in my initial submission, I said trust is not conferred on, trust is built. So the right to give and withdraw consent, if through my interaction or my engagement with you, and I see that, no, I gave a consent. Upon a second thought, this consent that I gave, I'm not comfortable with, I've thought about it, then I can also ask you, I can also withdraw my consent. I can also withdraw my consent in an explicit manner, and you have to also adhere to that. Right to prevent processing. I have the right to complain. Yes, a data subject has the right to complain. If there are issues with my data and I'm not comfortable with, I have the right to complain. And if I complain and the institution doesn't adhere to it, I have the right to escalate it to the Data Protection Commission to make a determination on my behalf. Right to freedom from automated decision making. In the digital economy, we all know there are certain decisions about us that doesn't have human intervention. So when I know that this decision about me doesn't have a human intervention and it's just that it's an automatically generated decision, I have the right to go back to my institution to request that I expect them to have a human intervention when it comes to this specific decision that they are having about me. And I have that right to be exercised in the Data Protection Act. So when I come and I know, I'm fully aware that this decision that was made concerning me, there was no human intervention, I can write to that institution to make them have human intervention, include it, and make a new determination for my case. Right to prevent processing of personal data by direct marketing. This one, I know that when we give everybody the chance, we will all have something to say. Even this morning, I myself, I had information, I had some institution contacting me to engage in certain services. But it's my right to prevent processing of my personal data by direct marketing. That is where we hold institutions accountable. Because when I give my information to you, I give my information to the telcos, I'm expecting to receive, not aside the mobile money services, be able to make phone calls or use data. I have not subscribed to any other thing aside making calls, browsing the net, and maybe using mobile financial services. So if there is any direct marketing, I have the right to prevent processing of my data by direct marketing, and the right to compensation when there is a breach that is causing when that is causing stress and harm to me, I have the right to seek redress at the court for compensation. So can we go to the last slide, please? So the keynote, yes. Privacy underpins the success of a business, and trust is as good as your profit. Yes, so when you've been able to put in all these measures, you are transparent, the data subject is able to exercise their right, you, the institution, so far as you've been able to put in that conscious effort to ensure that you are being transparent with your data subject, or you are being transparent with the people that you deal with, the information, the personal data that you have, trust is built. So nobody will tell them to still stay with you. And informally too, they will also engage their other partners to also be on board or subscribe to your services. There you are also increasing your profit. There is no need to go into marketing or advertising when you know that you've been able to build the trust of the people that you hold their data. And the last one, there's a better way forward to privacy, and that is trust us. Trust us that as regulators, we are going to protect your personal data. Trust us that as regulators, we are going to ensure that your privacy right is protected. You are going to ensure that your privacy right is respected. Trust us as regulators that you are going to live in an ecosystem where you are comfortable in dealing with institutions that are legally mandated to deal with you in the digital ecosystem. Thank you very much for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, trust the Data Protection Commission. Trust is more important than your profit. I believe I like that phrase. The Honorable Minister spoke about or challenged NITA regarding the certifying the authority. And there are opportunities to certifying or having a certifying authority. But before the Technical Services Director comes to talk about what NITA has for us and answer all the questions that I know many of you have, a cannot miss session. We do want to follow up the beautiful presentation we just had now with the issue and the role of consent. So you can trust, you can find out if the organization has your information. But before all that, as a human being or as an entity, you must give consent where your data is concerned. It is such a pivotal issue that we cannot have just one person do a presentation on it. And so we're having a whole panel. And this panel is made up of Mrs. Audrey Nisimreku, Risk and Cybersecurity Executive, Ghana Bankers Association. Is she here? It's coming to get you, but okay, this is fine too. No, please come. All right. We have Inshraba Yompa Esquire, Sompa and Partners. You if you come to say on your own. We have Martin Kwame Awaga, President, Ghana FinTech and Payments Association. We have Solomon Richardson, Director, Technical Services, NITA. Solo here. And then we have Madam Teki, who is the moderator for the panel. All right, so the floor is yours. Can we get some extra mics? We only have 2? Okay, let me give my mics away.
Okay, it is working. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. We've been asked this afternoon to really delve into this all-important discussion of consent. And we will be looking at consent management. But before I get to my panelists who come from varied backgrounds, and so we'll be speaking more to their position on these issues, I just want to give a brief overview of what we should be thinking about. So consent is typically permission, authorization, or a mandate to make someone make something happen or do something. Consent can be legal or non-legal. And in the legal parlance, we normally say that consent can be expressed in situations where people are directly, or individuals, or it could even be companies or legal persons, are directly required to demonstrate the expression of this consent. It can be implied from other sets of actions that has been taken to ensure that one person actually takes a number of steps. So by implied, you could, let's say, have an agreement, right, with NITA to be here today. And by virtue of that, you may have shared your information as part of your registration process. Now, the implied consent is that by registering, NITA will be able to use your information for purposes of this conference only. And more lately, in the parlance of data protection, you are likely to come across what we call informed consent. It's a new way of defining consent and has really become something that you keep hearing these days as a result of Europe's what they call General Personal Data Protection Act. The notion of informed consent comes from the basis that individuals must be made aware, not just aware, but understand the basis for which they are giving their consent. And so in the presentation we just had, she was mentioning issues about, giving consent without necessarily being able to read through the contract and all of that. With data protection, there is that requirement for an informed consent. So it's not just about the individual or whoever needs to give the consent providing a signature or appending their signature or giving the authorization. But there's the question of, do they really understand what exactly they are being made to? And I also thought that because we'll be having this discussion, it's very important to demystify this issue of consent. I have come from the background of data protection and more broadly digital rights. And lately, a lot of people confront me and see data protection as a consent-driven law. And so I think that it is very important for us this afternoon to clarify that the notion of processing of personal data does not wholly stand on consent. So consent is not the only requirement if you look at most laws to processing. So there may be other reasons or what we call justifications that facilitate the processing of data. And what I would typically tell my clients is that consent is the weakest link to the processing of personal data for a number of reasons. Usually from the legal perspective where individuals or entities are required to give consent, they can withdraw that consent. And so as an entity and an organization, you want to look at your strongest processing obligations or requirements outside of consent. Having said that, we will be talking this afternoon about consent management and how crucial and important it is. We'll be looking at the issues of transparency, user control, security, education and communications as well. And luckily for us, we have legal expert here by the name of Inshiraba. He's going to look at these issues from the legal perspective. Ms. Audrey is going to look at it from the risk and cyber security perspective. And then we have an industry player that will be looking at things from the fintech and payment systems approach. The hope is that, ladies and gentlemen, you will be, while going through these discussions, we'll be throwing more light on what the current landscape of consent management looks like, what the legal and regulatory requirements are, whether there are any ethical considerations that we need to be thinking about, and what are some of the practical implementation issues that we should be thinking of, as well as any future directions. I know time is fast spent, but I'm going to push each of you to try. Initially, you had like 5 minutes, but we're going to try and get each of you to give us, maybe use 3 to 5 minutes. 3 minutes, okay? I have been warned on time. So you're going to use about 3 minutes each to give us an overview of what consent management looks like from where you're sitting. And then we will go straight to the audience if they have any questions and take it from there. So I think I will start with you, Inshiraba.
Okay, all right, thank you. Hi. Oh, I'm still living in the past. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite. Consent, privacy, trust. It's a very philosophical conversation. Forget about the fact that we need to practicalize it. It's a very, very difficult conversation. I asked myself, what does the word mean? I did Latin in senior high. And so my Latin teacher would say every English word most likely has a root in Latin. And indeed, consent does. Two roots, con, centenary. Con is with, centenary is feeling. And so when the word actually means with feeling, what does it mean? Does it mean that when I go and I'm downloading an app, I should have a feeling about the app that is together with the developer? What exactly is, and it's important we settle the philosophical, more difficult questions, and then we can go into how do we practicalize those objectives. The real difficulty is that you have a right, but in consent, you're yielding to somebody that right. So what ordinarily is yours, is private, you do not own the right to share with anybody, is supposed to be privileged to you. By consent, you're allocating for it to be public, or you're allocating to it in the sense of your consent to be shared by other persons. Now, the difficulty now is, if I do consent to say, and please indulge my crude example, when we're in law school, they say, when you're doing something and somebody says no in the middle of something, you must stop in the middle of something. You're laughing because you understand. I haven't said anything, but you understand. Right. Now the real basis of that consent then is, what really am I consenting to? To what extent is my consent? What are the boundaries of that? Which even implicitly, if I agree to have a mutual feeling with you, in sense of this objective, what then is the boundary of that? In Ghana, I find our law very interesting, both from our constitution down to the Data Protection Act, because there are so many clawbacks, and clawbacks is literally giving with one hand and taking with the other, right? There are so many clawbacks such that it's almost impossible to practicalize it. So I'll give you an example. The law in Section 20 actually says that you're supposed to get consent for processing. But then it has a very fine word that says unless. And in the list of the unless, it says when it's necessary for purposes of a contract. It then says when it's authorized by law for the protection of the legitimate interest of the subject matter, necessary for the proper performance of a statutory duty. This is where I find difficult. Necessary for the pursuit of legitimate interest of the controller. Why does it matter to me that you should have, without my consent, you can still process my data if it is to your legitimate ends? And these are some of the exceptions we have. If you go to things like the GDPR, which was mentioned, consent, the basis of it is in four keyfold. It must be freely given, which is voluntary in all sense. It must be very specific to an objective. It must be informed, which means that I must know exactly what I'm consenting to, the boundaries of its consent. And then the final one is it must be unambiguous, which is that the lawyers like to do that. They'll write a very fine not with another not somewhere. By the time you read 5 times, you're confused, right? And so unambiguous in the sense that it must be in plain text. It must be very clear to everybody what exactly I'm consenting to. And then in that sense, plain language, in that basis, I can then say I have consented to the bounds of this. I'm sure I've overrun my 3 minutes. But I'll leave it to the conversations. Again, if you look at the details and maybe the data protection, it will be interesting to get some. I find the exceptions, again, in the totality of the law, practical difficulty in even questions around consent. If you look at the scope of the law, it almost exempts almost everything that is critical infrastructure, right? Your Section 63 says that for any regulated entity, whether it's banking, insurance, all of that is exempted from the Data Protection Act. It goes on, not only that, there's a list of exemptions, that includes national security, health, education, social work, regulatory, professional privilege, exam, crime, and taxes. So I'm asking myself, what then does it cover? So these are some of the practical difficulties, together with circumscribing the general difficulty around what consent means and what the boundary should be. But I'm happy to engage further.
Thank you very much, Inshiraba. You are here to answer the questions of why the law is that way. So I'll come back to you, and I hope the audience asks you that. Audrey, I'm back to you. So what's your notion? I think Audrey, you have the microphone. Okay. So what's your notion of this whole issue of consent from where you're sitting?
Coming from the financial sector, we are seeing a lot of progress. The Ghana card has brought about a lot of progress in the financial sector. Today, we are able to carry out the KYC with a single source of truth. Today, when you go to the banking halls, and you're doing your over-the-counter transactions, we're using APIs to connect directly to the NITA database, where we can validate that you are who you say you are, and truly the transaction that's going to happen here, you have consented even to the transaction. That has helped us a lot as banks, because there's been a lot of fraudulent activities happening internally as well, I must say, painful as it is, yes, I admit it, but this has helped us a lot. So we're very grateful to our policymakers for putting tools in place, not just writing the laws, but also putting the necessary tools in place for us to operate. I'll also go to the use of mobile apps. Right now, we're downloading mobile apps to transact. You hardly go to the banking halls. We consent when downloading the mobile apps. And as banks, we saw it upon ourselves, looking at the laws that have been put in place in data protection, that we need to add a layer of security. It's not just about the individual giving consent. Like my sister Jennifer mentioned, the font there, when you look at those consent agreements, we're using font 0. You battle to read it, and it's very, very long. So when you look at the layer that we have added as banks, we've ensured that even the mobile app that you use to transact is linked to your telephone number. You can't just get up today and go and do a SIM swap, then connect your mobile app to the banks and start transacting. Because we have monitored the terrain, we've had a lot of engagements with the police, with our policymakers, and we realized that these tools that they've given us start to empower us. And I would urge all of you, please, visit the banking halls, update your KYC details with your Ghana cards. It helps us a lot, fighting crime internally and externally. We also have Ghanaians in diaspora. They need to open accounts. They need to send money back home. How are we banks handling that part? We're looking at adopting the tools such as Adobe Sign, where somebody can forward all his details to us. You know, when you're using these tools, you actually even consent that this is my signature, and this data that I'm giving you, you can use it as a bank to open my account. So we are trying to look at the terrain and try and accommodate everyone. Once again, we're happy that our policymakers are doing something positive in as much as they write the stringent laws where sometimes it makes it difficult for us to work with the police. In the case where you become a victim, then because this same law protects the criminals. We're happy that something is being done. We hear that all countries within the UN, they've consented to a treaty on cybercrime, whereby now as a criminal, once we suspect that there's something going on fishy, we can just work with the police, provide enough evidence, and we start investigating. So it will be easy for us, working together with the telcos, to partner and help law enforcement clamp down on all this. Because honestly, like the Director General of Cybersecurity Authority mentioned earlier, if there's no trust in these digital platforms, we are working backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Audrey, Martin.
Yeah.
I think they've all hinted the challenges that currently exist, both from the industry perspective and what are some of your real-world experiences or possible case studies on how you've really navigated this space.
Yeah, so I think speakers have spoken about some advantages and merits or demerits to consent management. But when you look at it critically, consent management has to do with how to obtain data and thereafter the onward processing or usage of that data. Now, innovation, and would all believe or agree that we are in the age of digitalization, or we are in the digital age. And innovation, from where I sit as a digital financial services practitioner, is kind of scary, but exciting and interesting at the same time. Now, we are seeing a lot of innovations or technological changes in the world around us, and this is making things a bit complex to some extent or to a large extent, because in our parts of the world, what we are lacking is the understanding of some of these technologies we are seeing, and so in giving consent, you are somewhat very careful what that data is going to be used for. Now, Audrey talked about mobile apps. I think almost every one of us here uses one digital financial service application or the other. I am not campaigning for any, but I think mobile money or MTN mobile money is one of the most widely used platforms. Now, immediately you download that platform or any other digital financial service product, you are asked to fill in some EKYC details. Thereafter, your consent is requested for whatever data you have in there to be used for, or to be, data policy. You are asked to tick or check certain boxes for data privacy related issues. Now, because of the kind of innovations we are seeing in the digital financial services landscape, this is more like a two-edged sword, because whilst we are innovating for good, others are also innovating for unscrupulous reasons. So, someone can sit somewhere and then within a twinkle of an eye, take away, or, within a click of a button, can deplete all your financial resources on a digital platform. So consent is very important, and how institutions, or even the financial institutions themselves, she mentioned the banks, the fintechs alike, manage this is very important. I don't know how many of you remember the Facebook Cambridge Analytica issue that happened some time back, whereby our data, or anybody who was using Facebook, had an issue with their data being breached and all that. These are serious issues and can lead to legal tussles and so many other very, very critical problems. So we need to take the issue of data management seriously. A lot of times when we are downloading digital platforms, we don't really read or take the time to go through some of this data privacy policy and what it entails or what it has for us. We just go in there, take it, and then move on. But to explicitly give your information like that without knowing what the information is going to be used for, it's actually giving yourself away in one way for attacks and data breaches issues. So that's why I think it's very important that we take our time, particularly in this day of the digital world, to educate ourselves, to take time to read, to find out what some of this information are going to be used for before we put it out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that we're doing well on time, which means that I can grill you a little bit, and I'm looking forward to that. Now, I've heard complex, confusion, and I'm going to throw these back to you, because managing consent is a very complex issue, especially within the context that we're looking at these. We've clearly recognized the fact that consent in this case has legal ramifications. We've also, through our discussions, highlighted that there are technical implications of it. We've also mentioned the importance of technologies and new innovations in helping us manage these issues. And I'm going to start with you, Inshiraba. How do we, in spite of all the confusion that you've mentioned, how do we work around this maze?
Okay, thank you. I think that there are some of my personal view about what is good about our 2012 law is that it allocates principles for judgment to be made. And so it is not only prescriptive, it's also principle-based. And so, for example, on the basis, if you're referencing anything to the principle, how then do you make a judgment as to whether or not the consent is good or otherwise? The very first thing is that whoever is collecting your data, a consumer end, that's from those of us using the services, you must know that the data controller has an obligation to be accountable to you. There's a requirement, there is a principle of accountability. Whatever that means in the details of the law, there are some prescriptions. But the overall principle is to say, I have access to the data, I have access to know who you're sharing the data with, I have a right to stop you from processing within 21 days. If you can't, tell me why you can't. So the principle of accountability is well firmed. So in navigating, that's the first thing I want to say, in navigating this complex, the very first thing we need to understand is that the provisions of the law is not only in the pure form of the prescriptions of it, but we should understand what the principles are so that we can anchor even when we find ourselves in complex times. And the very first one is accountability. The fact that if you're giving, so we all came here and we registered, right? By providing that, there's an obligation for somebody to be accountable for that, right?
Does it, not to cut you, does that necessarily mean that, you know, I'm consenting to something? Because we're looking at consent management, and I believe there are a lot of businesses here that have to comply with a lot of the legal obligations around that. Does accountability mean consent?
Right, that's a good question. There are two different concepts, except to say that for purposes of consent, when you have received it, or if you're processing for any legitimate reason other than consent. So if I have a contract with you, it's almost implied in the performance of the contract that you may have my personal data. If you're processing for lawful means, or it's a statutory obligation, you may collect it not only because I've consented, but because some other law enables you to be able to collect and process. The point, however, is, by whichever means you have come by that information, whether or not I consented, the reference in terms of principle is to say, by dint of having my personal data, you are accountable to me on that, right? And for me, and I'm trying to answer the question of how do we navigate the complexities. For us as consumers, once we understand that, for enterprises as controllers, we then must understand that for every data we hold, for every data tag we hold on any identifiable person, there's an obligation for us to account. Specifically on consent.
I think that I have to cut you. You're behaving typically like lawyers do, and I don't like.
I'm answering without answering.
I don't like lawyers much, so I think.
Talking about one, right?
Yeah.
Talking about one.
Let me get a bit of. We'll come back.
Right.
But let me get everybody's input on this. Audrey, you spoke about solutions. I really want to hear more about, are there innovative solutions that is really helping us navigate this issue of consent, especially because in the space that we are in, like I said, it's also a legal obligation. So of all the, jargons that Inshiraba is throwing at us, have you
I thought I was on the floor, actually.
Yeah, have you been able to give us, a perfect solution? Because the lawyers like to confuse things.
Perfect solutions, as long as there's a human being involved, there'll always be a flaw. But coming from the financial sector again, I would say there's a lot that is happening within that space. There's a lot of conversations between the regulators and the banks. We are looking at the terrain and we are realizing that so much has changed. Traditional banking doesn't work anymore. And when it comes to us, it actually forces us to now even collaborate. We even have committees where we sit with our competitors, the telcos who are coming to steal our small coins because they're now offering banking services. But because we need to collaborate, because that's what the end user wants. We're even looking at a situation whereby you're coming to open an account with me. I need to know how you spend your money. I know that it's not all the money that sits with the bank that you own. You have money that you are receiving from your small shop in your area, which is you're probably using mobile money to receive those funds. And before I profile you, I need to be able to know your spending. You probably have sums of money which I do not have preview to. So there's a conversation which is happening whereby we are looking at the user consenting, user initiated, because right now we're in a situation whereby you're coming to open an account with me, then you say, okay, use this information to open the account for me. We are driving to a point whereby the users will say, I want that service. Please go to the banks. I give you consent, go to the banks and get data for me so that you can make a decision about my profile so you can offer me this service. Can you imagine the amount of the cutoff time we can have? The time that we can cut if you're applying for your visa for travel, if you can actually give consent to the embassy to say, you want my personal data, you want my bank statements, go to this bank, I bank with this bank. Having a secure channel that the embassy can actually reach out to the bank and say, Audrey is here to apply for her visa, I need to know more information about her. That will make our life a lot more easier. So that is where we are moving. I think we should start looking at even solutions, Kwame is here, whereby we are now giving the power to the end user, where they are now requesting for you as a data custodian to actually share that data with whosoever needs it. And in that case, it gives us more control, because I know that what will the embassy do with any other data? And it will be predefined what the embassy will get from the bank about me, because it's just only for processing that visa. So we are moving in the right step. As innovators, I think we should also be catching up. And as end users, it is very important for us to equip ourselves with information and knowledge so that we can make informed decisions. Those user agreements we are signing before accepting any service, that time is coming to an end. We are now going to determine what kind of information you are even collecting from me. Some institutions collect too much information. You're asking yourself, what would you use this information for? But where we are going, we're looking at open data sharing, whereby it will give a lot of power to each end user. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Martin, I think my question to you is about the same. How are you specifically doing this? If you can give us more practical, because I know there are a lot of people here.
Yeah, so currently in our current digital and technological or innovative dispensations, consent management is now being shaped, by a mix of or a combination of emerging technologies. Now we have AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning that provides personalized consent experiences. So you can enter into a platform, a digital financial services platform, and some of the things maybe you are interacting with, an AI, chatbot or anything like that, and the questions they are asking you, you would be wondering whether it is a human being asking you those kind of questions for, your data privacy purposes. So AI and machine learning are handling some of these things that we are seeing. So these are some of the innovations that we are seeing in the space. Additionally, we're also looking at the fact that, there's also another technology that is causing that to happen. we have blockchain. A lot of the fintechs or the financial services are also now adopting the usage of blockchain technologies. Now, these blockchain technologies, once your data is in there, they are untemperable. You cannot tamper with them. You cannot edit them and what so on and so forth. So some of these fintechs are deploying, or digital financial service providers or payment service providers are deploying some of these technologies so that when you put your data in there, and for us in the financial services industry, your data in there is basically your finances. And finances underpins our, well-being as a human being. So once you put in those technologies like the blockchain, your data cannot be tampered with. And that's some of the consent management innovations we are seeing in the space. Yeah.
Thank you. Back to the lawyers. Yes. So you're hearing about all these technologies and how it is helping. But I want to go back to what you were speaking on earlier and then draw a reference between consent management and legitimate processing of data, because you kept going there. Now, I had already mentioned that legitimate processing of data is essentially any other reason for which you process data, and consent, which normally can be withdrawn. So where do you draw the line on this? And I'm highlighting this because there can be a bit of confusion around that. How are we managing consent, and can we distinguish between consent and other forms of legitimate processing of data, or these go hand in hand?
Right. Google, for example, was fined, I think, 50 million euro by the French data protection. And the central question was the nature of the consent giving, whether the consent was informed and unambiguous enough. For example, if the technology comes with a box that is already checked, do you opt me in and then I opt out? Or I must make an active choice to opt in? Those simple things, the technology provision can go into answering the legal question as to whether or not consent is valid. And then I'll come to the second leg. So the very first one is, do you opt people in and give them the right to opt out? Or is consent really voluntary in the way that they actively make the choice to say, I want this? Now, the second thing I will say in reference to that is, for a controller, therefore, you need a consent register because, as you said, people opt in and out. And so you should be able to tell at any point in time whether Yao still consents to you sending him an email or otherwise, right? So, and that's where I guess the complexities come from. So the technology must allow for the fact that if I want to opt out today, you must allow me to opt out today. And so for many emails, you have subscribe at the base of it where you can click to subscribe out. Those are some of the things. In terms of how it directly connects with either legitimate processing, the law gives various bases on which a controller may process data. Consent is one of them. So if, for example, for tax purposes, the GRA does not necessarily need my consent to go to a bank to say, can I see his bank account? So on those legitimate bases, for institutions that process for legitimate reasons, the law does grant some regime. And even in Ghana, the specifics, as I said, so is either a lawful means, you have a contract for that end, or for some other reason, a statute mandates you to do that service. So consent is not in all cases, consent is the only factor for which a controller may process your data.
Thank you. I think this time I'll come to you, Martin, based on what, and then please get ready for your questions. And I'm waiting for very hard questions. I think I've run out of them. So yeah, Martin, he's talking about, we're back to the same issue we're discussing on how you're managing that. And I know that it's not, at least in your space, especially where you end up using a lot of technologies to manage these issues. It's not a simple thing as in, okay, this is my software backend that is working on consent. You probably may have to manage the entirety of your processing. And so how do you, again, navigate on the basis of that? Right? I know a lot of tech companies will say they're simple to just get consent for everything, but then there may be challenges along the way. So how are you actually doing these things?
Okay. So one of the things that we are seeing happening with this consent management compliance issues is the fact that you have to be able to establish a flexible opt-in and opt-out mechanisms. Now, for instance, you mentioned something about Google being fined.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you are, putting out this, data protection-related issues or policies or mechanisms, you have to make sure that the opt-in, opt-out mechanisms are flexible. How are they going to be flexible? Now, you do not opt in the user of that platform or whatever before asking them to opt out. I mean, it has to be flexible. You have to give them the consent.
I wanted to clarify that as well so that people don't get confused, because the notion of opt-in and opt-out is also a question of law.
Yes.
So in Ghana, our policies around that is clearly opt-in.
Yeah.
But there are other jurisdictions that have opt-out. So just to clarify.
Yes. So in Ghana, like she rightfully mentioned, yes. So that's what we are seeing. But in other jurisdictions too, they allow you to opt out or opt in, or they opt in for you before you come.
What they call
yes,
opt-out.
yes, to opt out. Now, and one of the things we are also having is there are challenges in these mechanisms, in the creation of these mechanisms, because some international frameworks, regulatory frameworks, like you actually mentioned, give you that option. But in our local context, we have the, that kind of disparity. So there are challenges no matter how you look at it. But usually, I always say that when you are doing putting in place these policies, you have to look at how the ecosystem in which you are operating in the local jurisdiction. For instance, if you are operating in Ghana, the laws that pertain to consent management should be applicable to you first, or you should implement those kind of laws into your data collection policies before thinking about doing that for the global or international stage, because your local jurisdiction is where you are going to gather that data from. So then you have to imbibe or input their regulatory laws into whatever you are doing first.
Okay.
You have to consider that as one of the.
Martin, Audrey, yes. So from your world, how does this work? The issue of managing consent, so to speak, and then legitimacy of processing of data.
I think one thing we need to also appreciate is, with all the laws that we have in place, we should also have it in our minds that we need to take baby steps. We are in a situation where if you need to even confirm your indenture about your land, we still need to go through documents which are piled up, backing dates to the early 60s or 40s. We need to be in a position where we allow ourselves to allow all the systems to be digital. Because honestly, opting in and opting out, that I have your information about you, whereby I still have this, or you come up to me and say, I need all my data. This data is stored in archives where we probably don't even have access. It's not even probably stored in maybe in a methodological order that I can just go in there and pull it out. In all this, I think we need to be strategic. We should allow the terrain to grow. Fortunately or unfortunately, our laws went on ahead without moving together with our digitalization efforts, which is somewhat good, and sometimes it puts us in a very bad space. To our policymakers, I would plead with you again, let us look at the terrain and come up with other supporting notices and directives that would enhance the laws that we have. Because when you look at the digital space, it's moving rapidly. The laws that we have, even when you look at technology, today infrared hardly works, Bluetooth doesn't work. So you can imagine a law that was developed during the Bluetooth times. It will be specifically specifying Bluetooth, which is not applicable today. So we should, as we put the laws in place, we should also have room to have others that will come and supplement the laws in place so that we can move together with innovation. The digital space, we have to allow innovation, and innovation somewhat makes you compromise on certain things. So I think that's one thing we need to look into.
I think I'm a very good timekeeper. We will be inviting questions. I don't know if there's a microphone. Any hands for questions? And whilst you're asking those questions, right, I just want to, please, if there's a hand.
Yeah, I'll take a question. I want to start with questions.
That's not fair.
No, I'm warming them up. You know, you usually have to warm them up. But it follows Yalson's thing that he was saying about actually both of you, about the opting in and opting out. But you were talking about flexibility. I want to enhance more on ease, because there's flexibility and there's ease. Sometimes it is difficult for you to opt out or move from the screen. And in the factor of ease, is it based on timing? So maybe say I should be able to opt out within 5 seconds, because most people get frustrated when they can't opt out and then they just to move on. So how do you define ease and where does it fall in?
Well, I think that would have to go into the, the process design of that, or the design of that particular technology, or whoever is putting in place that, opting in solution. So I think the issue of ease is very important, but most people get frustrated and they would either decide not to use the platform or continue with whatever they are doing. But the issue of ease has to do with, how easy it is for the person to opt out. So I think that's one of the things. When it comes to the timing shouldn't take long, but it depends on platform to platform, and the timings, basically vary from where I sit. Yeah.
Thank you. 3 questions, and then we'll come back to the answers.
We have 10 minutes for Q&A, so 3 questions. But before that, let me quickly announce somebody's car. You need to attend to your car ASAP for security reasons and for data protection reasons. I won't tell you why, but it's very important to get to your car as soon as possible. It's a Toyota Camry Ash Toyota Camry GS 8880-20. So year 20, GS 8880, and it's a Toyota Camry. In fact, if you have a Toyota Camry, please go outside and go and check on your car, okay? Before I have to violate some data protection issues. Okay.
Okay.
Hi. On the back of opting in and opting out, probably let me try and make it a bit more confusing. And I'm going to, probably to the lawyer and practitioners. How feasible is it to implement time-bound consent? I give my consent, and then the consent I give you has a time, it's time-bound. So maybe 3 months. After 3 months, if you still need that consent, you might have to come back to me for that consent. How feasible is it to implement this consent in our environment, considering our laws and our maturity? Thank you.
I think, Solomon, you're supposed to join us on the panel. So I think that question you can carefully answer it. So please do us the honors as a member of the panel as well. Yeah, so we can hear your, your. Yeah.
Okay. So as you give your questions, please your name and the name of your institution, so that we can.
Yeah, Solomon has to answer one question for us. Yeah. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Reverend Dr. Nanaya Prempe. I'm the board chair for the Ghana Domain Name Registry. I was hoping that by the time you're done, the consumer will know who to call when they feel intimidated or that a breach in their data information. Because this pre-opting in for the consumer is a no-no. You should give me that power to determine whether your product is even exciting to me or attractive. Because several people are very ignorant or naive. So they may even overlook, and those things come in very tiny prints. You may not even see that the box is checked. And so it's robbery, it's deceptive. And so the consumer is being taken advantage of on many cases. So I don't know if it's NITA that's going to handle that but I think there has to be policies to protect the consumer and give that power to the consumer. It's like you're giving me a ballot paper to vote and you've already checked your name.
That's the opt-out.
Yes, so the opt-out is a no-no. I think policies must be considered to make it an open space for the consumer to have the power to decide whether they want to do. And also, you have to provide the consumer with information if you feel like your data has been breached. Is it the data commission
Data
the protection commission
yes, yeah.
that you go to?
We have a representative here. So.
Yeah, so they have to be very loud. They have to be very loud so consumers know that they are there. Patricia, is she around? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. The last question.
Last question.
There's a question.
And while we're getting the last question, by the way, everybody who owns an Apple, you're already opted in for
Yes,
sharing your information.
Let's make it snappy, please.
My name is Anastasia Manyaovo from Community Water and Sanitation. And so, from where Reverend ended, what is the gatekeeper's role? If I realize that maybe controller and accountant general, they have my data, and it's been given to so many susu groups, and every day you get about 50 texts in your mail. You have not subscribed to any susu company. And then you come to the telcos, and then 3 days ago, 2-3 politicians call you, vote for Osimasi or Kojo Mensah, vote for this person. I did not subscribe to that. All I did was to register my phone for my communication. Am I the one to report to the gatekeeper, or if the gatekeeper gets to know, he or she will take action? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wait.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are 3 questions. One on managing consent in a time-bound manner. The other one was looking at the notion of opt-out, opt-in. And then the last one is the gatekeeper's role. I will give each of you 30 seconds to answer these 3 questions.
Okay. So I'll take the gatekeeper's role. 30 seconds, basically. Yeah. So one of the things, I used to work in the Ministry of Finance. So what Madam is actually, telling us is something that's it's actually something that is really happening. We're actually seeing, you're being given to susu companies and all that, and you get frustrated. So some of these things, I think it's your mandate as an individual as well to, call on or report to the necessary authorities like the Data Protection Commission for them to handle it for you. And then if they do not take action, then, you can also find other alternative means to get that issue resolved, because the data you provide for Controller and Accountants General's Department is not supposed to be given
thank
to
you, Martin.
these institutions. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Ishiraba. I'm
Okay, so 30
monitoring
seconds.
my time. So.
Okay, so on the time bound, is whether it's feasible or otherwise, I can see practical challenges, particularly when the specific of the object, whether a contract is ongoing or whether the legal mandate exists, it may go on for a while. But the law says you have a right to opt out whenever. So I guess that answers the question. You can go to the controller and say, stop using my information. Even in other jurisdictions, they have the right of erasure, which is, I want to be forgotten. Clean everything about me. That's a different conversation.
Thank you.
On the
time is up.
on the gatekeeping, just a quick one on the gatekeeping. I think that generally the data protection, we agree, needs to shout, as was said, but we also need to understand we have a responsibility. It's your data, so own it, assert your right for somebody to delete or stop from using your data and all that is
Thank
required.
you.
So,
all right, Audrey, your reaction.
Thank
to
you,
it?
ma'am. Like I mentioned earlier that there's something which is brewing within the financial sector. There will be an entity solely that is monitoring what your data that you shared with the banks and whosoever comes to request for that data. Why the difficulties we're facing today is because there's no oversight in terms of monitoring who's coming for what data and how are they using it. When it comes to our space, integrity is everything. Reputation is everything as well. We need you to trust the banks to be able to use the services that we provide. So the gatekeepers need to also empowered, which is why you need that secure platform where somebody is just watching what is being exchanged, and that is where it will give the user the power to say that I'm giving you authorization to only use this data because I'm applying for the visa. After that, don't share my data with that visa, with that embassy again.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. By the power vested in me, I know I've rushed you. I'm going to give each of you a minute to round up all that you have said. And I'll start with you, Audrey, and then end with Martin. So a minute. Yeah.
I think it's very important for all of us as we are generating our digital footprints to also know where your data is stored and how it is used, and empower yourself to know how the law can work for you. In as much as if we do this, remember on the opposite side, the cyber criminals, they understand these laws perfectly. That is why they're able to hide and use the same laws to protect themselves. So let us empower ourselves and know our rights, and also work with the institutions. It doesn't help that when your data is out there, then you rush to splash it on social media. Have you had a discussion with the institution that holds this data? Because you know where this data is being held. Try and start working with that institution, giving them more information, empower them so that they can know that this is what is happening. I mentioned before, where the digital space is, there's always the human element. And like we say, if there's a human being, this data that is being leaked through the Controller General, I can tell you for a sure fact, there is no authorization from the Controller General himself, but it is actually individuals that are leaking this data.
I think in order to qualify my 1 minute, in a sentence, give your concluding remarks.
I don't understand why the rules are changing when it came to me. Maybe because I have the pension too. Okay, but two quick takeaways in a minute. Okay. The very first one is to say we're in an age where the conflict between democratization and sharing of data and the privacy of individuals, going way back to Aristotle and the conversation as to your individualism, we've come to the conflict in no ways than we've seen it. And so, because the conflict is real, we need to engage actively on the boundaries of what privacy is. So that's the first thing. This conversation is by no means exhaustive, but we need to have an active dialogue as to how we define the boundary, because the innovation will happen. It must happen, but we must define the boundaries through privacy. The second thing to end,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
thought that was
to end, we've all heard about trust and the ability to build transparency when it comes to consent management. For me, to end, one of the things I would like to say is that we need to educate and empower ourselves. Now, we take it for granted, and the fact that we do not read a lot when it comes to consent management or data privacy policy issues, particularly in a digital age. Let's take it as a responsibility on ourselves to empower and educate ourselves once we know that, the playing field has changed, particularly in this digital age. And would also are hoping to see more from the gatekeepers like the Data Protection Commission, particularly to take it on themselves to, come out with a lot more interactive, educative content, particularly when it comes to this topic, consent management and data privacy policy issues and relations. Because we are not seeing, this has been issues that have been nascent for some time. There has been no discussions on it, and we have not really seen a lot happening in this space or on this topic or these issues when it comes to the Data Protection Commission. So this is actually a call to action to all of us and the gatekeepers as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and our wonderful audience. I think you should give them a round of applause for allowing me to grill them this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please give them another round of applause. I think one of the things sometimes that comes to mind is we talk about technology, we talk about the virtual space, but we forget that the virtual space and technology is merely an extension of the real world. So in a continent where we like to share our resources and so forth and so on, and now that the resources are data, including your own personal information, how do you prevent the sharing? Yes, so how do you talk about privacy in a society where we like to share? That's another conversation. So, that we have to explore. Is it natural to our culture? Is it natural to our context? Or is it something that we're struggling with? While we ponder on that question, let's give them a minute to give us some good sounds. Maybe you can give us a song on data privacy. Do you have anything like that?
Sure. So let's do this. Let's divide the room into two. The right side, you're called data. Left side, you're called privacy. This is what we'll do. Once I mention data, everybody on the data row, you get up on the music, give us a dance, and you sit down.
Thank you.
Once I mention privacy, you get up, shake yourself, and you sit down. So let's just do an example, all right?
Demonstrate the shaking so they don't cheat.
Exactly.
Full shake.
Thank you. So let's just do an example. Privacy. No, privacy on the left side. Left side. They are still seated. Okay, let's try that. Privacy. Okay, sit. Data.
Thank you.
The middle row are trying to exempt themselves.
Yes.
We will give them a name, protection.
Yes.
So let's try protection.
Protection.
All right.
Yes.
One more time. Data. Thank you. Privacy.
Shake.
Thank you. Protection. All right, so let's do this. Now we properly start. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right. I want data. I want data to come and dance for me. I want data. I want data to come and Thank you. I want privacy. I want privacy to come and dance for me. I want privacy. I want privacy to come and dance. protection. I want protection to come and dance for me. I want Iba. I want protection. I want protection to come and dance for me. Now all three, privacy, data, protection, everybody, all right. I want all three. I want all three to come and dance for me. I want Iba. I want all three. I want all three to come and to come and dance for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was amazing. Without the culture in the technology, we cannot have trust. So we're getting somewhere. It's taking him a while. He's been coming from a very far place to join the panel. The panel is over, but he finally got here, so we'll put him on stage anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Solo as he comes to talk to us about the Cybersecurity Authority.
Not the Cybersecurity Authority.
Sorry.
Please, can I have the presentation? My name is Solomon Kofi Richardson. I work with NITA. I work as the Director Technical Services. And today we've heard a lot about trust, building trust in our digital ecosystem. I am sure the speakers ahead of me have all brought our minds to how important it is to have trust in our digital space. When I am buying your phone, I can see you, you can see me. I can take the phone, check it, feel it. After that, I can give you the money. You can check the money, whether it is fake or, and so that one, trust is in person, you are able to. But when we talk about the digital space, where you don't see who you are dealing with, you can't touch and feel what you want to buy. And you also cannot see the money that you are supposed to get. How do you trust that at the end of the transaction, what you wanted to buy is exactly what you are going to get? Or what you, the money that is being sent to you is exactly what you are receiving. And so we're taking the conversation a bit further to talk about what government is doing in fostering trust. So we're going to talk about the setting up of certifying authority and the opportunities therein. Someone drew my attention even before I got here that when I said certifying authority, are we going to set up another organization, another authority to be doing this? Why are you splashing authorities and organizations all across in the name of technology and then all that? I'm like, when I get here, I will cure what we have done in terms of the statement we put across. We are not setting up another organization, but I'm sure you understand as I go across. So please. I want to start with this chart that we have over here. From 2017 to 2024, the total number of internet users in Ghana. In 2017, we were around 11.3 million. And let's see the steady growth all the way to January 2024. Ghana's internet users is around 24.06. That translates to roughly about 70% of the population who are active internet users. What does this mean? Please, the next. Now let's look at this statement as well by African Center for Economic Transformation. They are saying that Ghana's digital economy is currently valued around 1 billion. Around 1 billion. And may reach about 5 billion USD by 2030. But they go on further to say that the digitalization of Ghana is primarily fueled by the service sector, with minimal contributions from industry and agriculture. You ask yourself, why is industry not partaking in the digitalization area? There is something wrong. Let's look at the next statement. World Economic Forum in 2022, they also said, we found that a 5% point increase in digital trust result in an average increase in GDP per capita of $3,000. Just 5% of digital trust increase will increase a GDP per capita by 3,000. From a GDP per capita perspective, this means we can significantly impact the global economy just by paying attention to trust, digital trust. So I am sure if the finance minister is sitting somewhere and hears this, he will ask, how much money can I pump into digital trust to make sure that we start putting these things up. Please, let's go. So with that background being set, we now moving to, so in fostering digital trust, we in government have identified PKI, that is public key infrastructure, as a tool for one of the tools, let me put it that way, for fostering digital trust. If you look at digital trust, these are normally the pillars that they talk about in digital trust: the security, privacy, transparency, accountability, reliability, ethical conduct, and compliance, being the pillars of digital trust. One of the reasons why we've chosen the PKI is that we see PKI helps us to achieve most of these pillars that we have over here. With PKI, we can assure some level of a high level of security. It helps us to implement privacy. It brings about transparency because there's also accountability. And then, of course, reliability. But reliability, it depends on how you implement it. Then you go to the ethical conduct and the compliance. It helps you check compliance very seriously. Please, next one. So, if you want to implement PKI, then you need what we call the certificate authorities. PKI, the very moment you talk about PKI, public key infrastructure, you are talking about issuing digital certificates that, or let me even put it this way, all that you can talk about when you say PKI, you are talking about encryption. To put it very simply, encryption. Encrypting data in transit, encrypting data in storage, even data, however you can think of data, encryption. So we are saying that encryption is one of the most secure ways that we can keep our data, whether the data is in transit or is in motion. So we have decided that we are going to use PKI to provide another level of security within our digital space. As a result, you need an agency that is the certifying agency that regulates the space. Because the very moment you say that you want to do all these digital signatures, you need bodies that we call certificate authorities to come to issue the certificate. The certificate, how is it issued? Because of security, how is it issued? How is it managed? How is it maintained? How is it retired? That whole process you want to be able to regulate so that people will trust that all these activities are being done in a very regulated space. So for you to do this, you need a law. Ghana's Electronic Transaction Act is currently responsible for all things electronic transaction in nature. It addresses the issue of digital certificates, electronic signatures, certificate authorities, and many more. This requires the setting up of, that is the law. The law has requested that there should be a certifying body by NITA to handle the regulation, let me see, I think to regulate the setting up and operations of the certificate authority. So the people were asking whether we are going to set up a whole new agency. No, we are not setting up a whole new agency. It's NITA that is setting up the certificate certifying activities within NITA. So more like a department, you can put it as a unit within NITA that will be doing this activity. That will set up the certifying authority. Then we have the certificate authority will also ensure some level of consumer protection. Madam mentioned so much about consumer protection, how the consumer is being protected. The certificate authority will ensure that the players within the space, the operators within the space, the certificate of the certifying agency will ensure that there is fair play. Because when an investor is coming in and he's not sure whether you're going to be fair or you're going to allow somebody to get better opportunities than them, that becomes a problem. So that is also one of the roles that the certifying agency will be performing. So in setting up the certifying agency, or the role of the certificate, the certifying agency, 3 things are key, and this has to be done. We are talking about the laws and the regulation. Luckily for us, we already have a law. Luckily for Ghana, we already have a law, that's the Electronic Transaction Act, that gives the provisions for all about the certifying agency, what should be done and what not. We're talking about building the infrastructure, but even if I go back over here, we have the law, but we don't have, in implementing the law, you need further regulations, further guidelines, and some rules that will help you to actually implement the law. We have the law, but currently we don't have the necessary regulations, necessary guidelines and rules that will help us in fully setting up the certifying agency. Yes, we'll get there. So, yes. When we talk about the infrastructure is where you build the PKI infrastructure itself together with the accompanying technologies that is required to be able to implement all these certificate issuing and stuff like that. Currently, so far as Ghana is concerned, we are lucky. We have built out the root PKI infrastructure. Every country can have only one route. Every country. If you look at how PKI is implemented, every country can have one route. Then out of that route, you can have different branches that you get. I'm sure I'll show more diagrams to explain further. So we have the route in place, meaning that we are ready. We have not just built the route, but we have also integrated and registered the country route with ICAO PKD platform. ICAO is the body that is responsible for aviation, and because of travel and travel document, they have created a directory that allows all countries to, when you issue digital certificates. So if I issue passport for you, I keep the digital version of it, and then I share that digital version with ICAO, so that all countries that are connected to ICAO will be able to verify when you get to their airport, and then you give them your details, and then your passport, they scan it, they'll be able to tell that this certificate, this passport was indeed issued by Ghana. You understand? So now we are connected and have registered with ICAO for that. Then, of course, you need a team that will manage everything so far as the certifying agency is concerned. So these are the 3 things. We'll go through one after the other and let you know where we are at each stage. I spoke about the electronic transaction law, the law and the regulation. I said we have a law currently, but we don't have the regulations, we don't have the guidelines and the rules that will help us to certify, that will help us to accredit the certificate authorities. Now the certificate, that will help us do that. So what we are now doing is that we are now hiring a consultant to work with us to develop the additional regulations that is needed, the guidelines that is needed, and the rules that is needed. So if you look at this, we have the guidelines, rules, and for accredited certificate authority licensing. So we will develop guidelines and rules for accreditation. We will do it for their operations, how you are supposed to operate, how you are supposed to handle the certificate. When you issue the certificate, there are international best practice of how you are supposed to handle those certificates, so you don't compromise the security of those certificates. All those rules and guidelines will be drafted with a consultancy. We will do the protection measure, and then of course we will do what we call the identification of the authentication. So let me give a typical example. If you want to issue a certificate for your device, or let's say for you as a person, for maybe the purpose of certified email, how do I, in the first place, get to know that you are who you are before I create that certificate for you? You don't want Amma to come saying, I am Kofi, and then you create that certificate for Kofi and hand it over to Amma. So then that means that in creating those certificates in the first place, you need to be sure that who you are creating it for is who they really are. So this platform, for instance, will really have to work with NIA database, because they have built the gathered our data for our ID. So you will check and say that indeed this is a, and when you are fully sure that that is the person who is requesting for the certificate, you create a certificate for the person. Then we will have rules on accreditation CA equipment. Of course, we'll come up with some technical specifications. And so we will tell you that if you want to operate a CA, these are the requirements. The servers that you have to come with, these are the specifications. Your operational facility, these are the specifications. This is the security that is required for your facility. All that will be spelled out very well. So these are some of the things that we need to do so far as that is concerned. When we now have these regulations or these guidelines and rules, what would then happen was that we will now have a benchmark for which we can accredit a certificate authority. At that point, we can now put out a request for proposals from private companies that want to operate as certificate authority. For private companies, because we don't intend for government or for NITA to do all certificate activities over here. That is not the plan. We think that we are creating the enabling environment for the private sector to do that. When you have a phone and you think that you want to, put a digital certificate on your phone, so that when your bank is doing transaction, and then let's say your bank app, the banks can implement to make sure that anytime they are doing transaction, even on your phone, they will certify that the phone is indeed this particular phone or is for you. And then the transaction will happen. At some point in time, when your phone gets missing, you can go to the person who issued the certificate, and they will revoke that certificate. The very moment they revoke that certificate, your bank app will be able to tell that this phone has been compromised and so will not authorize transactions on your phone. So these are some of the things that can be done. And all these business, we expect the private sector to take up that business and then go with us. So by the time we finish all these things, then that means that we have what it takes to now call for proposals from the private sector, for them to bring proposals. We select those that meet the requirement, we accredit them, and they start providing those services, electronic signatures and all those services that we're talking about. So that is it when it comes to the laws and regulations. Now, on that aspect of infrastructure, I mentioned earlier that we have already put in place the root infrastructure. But this is the architecture that we have chosen as a nation, so far as our PKI infrastructure is concerned. So you can see we have the national route infrastructure. That is the route. Of course, we are going to have the managing CA that is responsible for managing the whole platform, and then the national route infrastructure. Out of the national route infrastructure, you are going to have more like two main certificate authorities. You have the government certificate authority and that of the civil certificate authority. You can call it a private certificate authority. So under government, all certificates that are needed by government for government activity, if government want to electronically sign signatures, all those sort of things can happen under this one. And then the private sector, so far as the private sector companies come, you keep on certifying them as different certificate authorities. But then all these are trusted source because they are all linked to the national route. Then that means that trust can go across. You can build trust across. Then of course we have what we call the country signer infrastructure. That's the country signer and verification infrastructure. what that one also happens is that if you are going to issue a certificate that will operate outside of our shores, outside of Ghana, you need to give it a country seal, so that when that certificate is out there, wherever the verification is checking, we see that, okay, this unique seal that has been given is from Ghana. Then they can go down to see, okay, apart from the country seal, what else comes? So this is the infrastructure as we have. So right now, we have the country one in place. We are moving further to now deploy the government CA as well as the private sector CA, and the processes have started already. As we talk right now, we have some CAs that are operating already. Your ID card, national ID card, for instance, is making use of this infrastructure. So we have secured your national ID card with this technology. Visas, Ghana visa right now, anybody who requests for a visa, this technology is being used to secure our visas. Now we are moving from the passport that we have right now to a chip-based passport, and that one as well, I'm sure before the end of the year, that service will also come. Passport will now start issuing the chip-based passport. All setup is done. They've done the test trial, successful, and so I'm sure that before the end of the year, that service will also be rolled out by Passport. That is also using this technology. So we can say that even before we properly go to full operation, there are 3 applications across government that are already using this platform, this technology. Please. On the technical team side, yes, we already have a very core team that we're working right now. We're hoping to be hiring more to make sure that the team, we have the right number of team that we need. Of course, training the team. And the most important thing is this one. Our approach right now is to partner very much with the private sector. Private sector. A lot of skill sets sit in there. A lot of resources in terms of finance and all that sit in there. And so this time around, we partner with them, and then they provide most of the technical brains that are required, the resources that are required. We normally will limit ourselves to the place of regulating and managing that relationship. So we hope to be working very much with the private sector. So that is where we are. Now let's take this going forward. These, more like a calendar. It's 2024 to 2025 calendar. Look out for these activities. I hear the Minister of Communication has come to issue certain directive. I put this presentation before she issued those directives. We will see how we can align with her timelines that she has issued. But we are hoping that latest by March 2025, the regulations, guidelines, and rules that we are working on right now will be ready. The very moment this is ready, then that means that we can now issue our request for proposals for certifying authorities. So accreditation and licensing of certificate authorities, we are hoping latest by June 2025 should be done. At the same time, we are working on enabling, when I showed the PKI architecture, on enabling the government CA. We are not just enabling the government CA, but we are enabling the government CA and also rolling out the applications that are required. So let's say application like electronic signature, applications like timestamp. When you go to the judicial service, for instance, every document that comes in, they need to make sure it came in this day at this time, this specific time. Timestamps, which nobody can now change it. All those applications, the strategy this time around is that we are not going to GRA will not say that I need electronic signature model, so they will deploy. Then judicial will also say that they also need electronic signature model. Then they also deploy. Then office of the president will also say they need, then they deploy. We are identifying all these certificate services that cut across government, and then we will deploy it as a shared service. Central, as a shared service. Then, once it's a shared service, every government agency can use it, either through API or through a shared portal, however that we think it will work, so that we save, we manage it well, and then the security around it is also assured, because when they are splitted around, you cannot be assured of what everybody is doing. So that is a strategy. We will deploy the operations of the GovCA together with the applications as a shared service. Then government agencies will utilize that. Then this, very important, we are hoping that we can start by July 2025, where we now start signing citizen document using the digital certificate. So a driver's license, your land title document, your secondary school, your university certificate. We are hoping that now we can digitally sign all these things. And the very moment we sign them, it is now difficult for somebody to say that they have gone to fake a university certificate. It is very, very difficult with this technology. Once we digitally sign all the certificate that is in the system, nobody can again go and fake those certificates. Because by simple verification, you can do both online and offline verification. Once you do that, you'll be able to tell that this is not issued by the university. You don't even need to call the university. Land title document is one of the fake documents that is one of the documents that is fake most in our country. Sometimes you have a parcel of land, you have two owners. They all have indentures to that. You can't tell who did it first, who registered it first, and with this technology, we will be able to address all these challenges. So we are hoping that by July 2025, we should now be able to be signing all government-issued citizens' documents, even your fire certificates, all those sort of things. We should be able to do all these things. My friends from, are they here, fire service? Are they here? They are not here. Ah, they are here, okay. Police, all your police reports, all those sort of things, once we digitally sign them, because nowadays a lot of people are walking around with some police reports and you don't know where they are getting it from. So I think we can solve a lot of these problems once we fully roll out this infrastructure. So this is what it means. This is what government is doing so far as fostering digital trust is concerned. I'm sure it is not only this initiative, there are more initiatives. That is how come now the digital trust conversation is an annual one. So next year, we are hoping that we'll have another conversation probably outside of PKI and then discuss so far as digital trust is concerned. And by having these conversations more and more, we hope that our digital space will be more trusted. Thank you very much.
He said, you know, these 419 boys have been using people's fake pictures. Are we going to be able to digitally sign pictures so people will stop faking pictures and pretending to be somebody else?
Once it is a digital information, it can. So maybe you should consider a business within that space, and then be ready to register with us as a certificate authority when we are there. But once it's a digital thing, then you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When I look out at the ages of the people here, I know everybody was around when we did the redenomination of the city. And what was the tagline? The value is the same. Ladies and gentlemen, the institution is the same. So, hashtag National ICT Week, add. No new institution for certificate authority. The institution is the same. NITA. Thank you. I'm sure it will help a lot of people. On that note, Do you want to leave with fire? We want to fire you up before you leave. So we are going to give the lawyer about 5 minutes or 10 minutes to come and fire us up before we leave. Ladies and gentlemen, Inshiraba Yalsumpa.
Thank you. Oh, I thought it was fire he was asking for. That's almost like, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've been given a real privilege to sum this up. I'm going to make a case for very interesting. Please go to the next slide. I'm going to make, I'm going to try at the end of the day to reduce the conversations into blocks such that we can go out of here with actionable insight. Now, for all of us, it's important that we should understand that we've come to an age of technology. You can't opt out. It is too late. If even you make a choice to go and live in the cave, there will be GPS and digital address system in the cave. The reality of our world is that the trends tell us let me start from the first, social media. How many of us do not have any social media account at all? At all. Not one. Not one. Right. So let the record show that nobody in the room is without a social media account. Now, the question... So, if you have a social, how many of us are wearing a watch that is supposed to be connected to our phone? Okay, so a few, right? The real question is that almost everything is supposed to be tagging a data. There are data tags, and we're collecting data in ways we cannot imagine. Almost every single technology, whether your TV, whatever it is, if you watch a Netflix for 1 minute, there are data tags in terms of choosing preference or trying to at least identify preferences. So the point I'm trying to make is that we've come to an age where technology and the trends of technology is come to stay. Because of the reality that we're collecting data from socials, from the wearables, or all the other things we're plugging into the internet, whether it's a car, TV, all the other things. And now the recent conversation is cloud. We're all shipping our data to the cloud. And people are asking whether it's this cloud or that cloud. So we're all shipping technology. People are building solutions, sitting in servers in countries they have no idea where those servers are. We're all making choices for solutions that is cloud-based. I don't know how many people choose on-prem solutions. We almost all want to defer to some cloud somewhere. The reality is that, what does that mean? Mobility. Now, even the usage of technology is on our phone. And so, in terms of GPS, in terms of the ability to track, and all of that is recent. Now, the aggregation of all this data has become a conversation because now we have a pool of data which enables the AI we've been talking about and all the things we're all fascinated about now. Because we're collecting so much data, it's now easier to be able to statistically answer questions a human being will answer because there's a data pool sitting on the net. There is so much data for us to analyze everything, to build every model we want based on the data we have. But the question about security and privacy then becomes a conversation. To what extent must we sacrifice security and a sense of privacy for the good of the public, right? Can we all agree that's a very difficult question to answer? Oh, talk to me. Oh, please, be kind to me. I'm between you and your lunch. So if you're not kind to me, right. So please go to the next slide. Now, the real conversation is that the evolutions of time, mechanization, there was a day if you could power your ships with steam engine, you ruled the world. So Britain colonized almost everybody in the world from all far east down to Africa because they had steam engines and their naval and naval services led industrialization. talk about mass production and Ford's car and all of that, we came to a place where we should have understood that where we are is a natural course of computation. If you understand that everything is being reduced to the power of a machine to compute, then you should understand that the data storages of it will naturally give itself to AI and all the implicit things, that everything is connected to a network in a way that we must become aware of the security and privacy implications. Please move me up. Now, two quick questions, and the very first one is that on one part is a promise. It's a promise to say that we want an outcome. And from my background in information security, they will say that your confidentiality, integrity, and availability is your basic tripod. Everything you want to find is that I want this data. I want to make sure that only the right people have access to the data. Confidentiality. I don't want any other person other than the person who is right for it to see it. Availability says I want to be able to be sure that I get the data when I need to get it. There is nothing that disturbs my chance of getting the data when I need to get it. And then integrity is to say, can I count that the data I am accessing is accurate? So overall, the security implications has three questions we need to answer on one side, which is the promise. How can we make sure that all the conversations we've had, we can have access to all the data in a way that is secure, is available, and the integrity of it is guaranteed? But can we also agree that to be able to guarantee that our uncertainties, it's not an easy thing to say that the certificates that will be issued, for example, would always be secure, available, and the integrity is not compromised. It's a very difficult question from a technology point of view, but also from the people processes point of view, which in many sense is even weaker. Please move me up. So in many sense, you can guarantee the technology of it, but the real question is, how do you build a process and a people culture around it that guarantees you the outcome? Now, we all should understand that risk management, I'm sure in your department, in your sector, whether police, military, YOCO, many of us are beginning to be exposed to risk management and the conversations around it. But the real thinking around risk management is to say that, can we choose our poison? Can we understand the outcomes we're looking for and how likely those outcomes are to happen and at what cost? Right? What is likely to derail us from those outcomes and what can we do about it? In a way that we can choose what is acceptable to us and what is not acceptable to us. So if you take the privacy conversation, for example, can we all as a nation have a risk assessment and have a conversation to say that when it comes to privacy, this is the boundary. This is where we accept, even for purposes of public good, this is the level of privacy we accept and this is what we don't accept. So my very first key takeaway actionable point is that on an individual consumer, on a data controller from a company point of view, and from a national policy point of view, we need to engage actively so that we understand the appetites we have, right? It needs to be a very conscious, deliberate act, such that if you are choosing an app, you're very clear what data you're giving up for that service. And so you have in your mind, you're very clear what the outcomes are and what the risks are implicit in the choices. So the very first thing is that, and please indulge me, can you say with me, I will seek to understand the risks? Oh, please help me. This is the very first time I can tell a big policeman to say after me, and nobody will catch me. So please allow me. If I put it down, I'm finished. Right? So the very first thing is let's all seek actively to understand the risk of the choices. But that's the first message I want to leave us in terms of actionable insight. Actively seek to understand the risks. Because many of us, I talked about cloud. Many of us are shipping our solutions externally. Many of us are making choices for solutions. We do not know what the developments are. We do not know exactly what is happening. Can we reduce it and let not the IT people bully you with the jargons, right? Let's come back to class 1 and ask the very simple class 1 questions, whether it's a department or otherwise. And so that's my first one. Please go to the next one. This is complex, but only to make the point that AI will stay. Oh, that's a lot of time. I'm told I have 5 minutes. AI, there's a, you said? Okay, right. So this is to make the point that decision optimization has come to a place where we will rely on AI, right? The ability of automated algorithms to make decisions on our behalf is not a question of whether we choose it or otherwise. It is something that would happen. But the second actionable insight is that seek to understand the models, or at least the dependencies of the models. So what is the system you're going to use to say whether somebody, and there's a very interesting model I like to use. It's called the recidivism model. Basically, to make a choice whether you should take somebody to jail. Somebody is more likely to return to jail or otherwise. So when somebody commits a crime, there's a data, takes all the data tags and answers the question, when I look at his haircut, he looks like a criminal. So instead of giving him the lower bound, you give him the upper bound. Now, the questions about solutions like that is that it affects people's life. If you're making a credit decision to say that I will give you a phone and you can pay 1 cedi every month, why are you laughing? Please, do not put me in trouble. I beg you. I beg you in the name of God. That decision on the credit scoring has to be in the basis that we understand what the data inputs are. So, second actionable insight, I will seek to understand what the algorithms are doing. All of us, please indulge me. I will seek to understand what the algorithms are doing. Okay, so that's my second one. My last one, please go to the last slide. Next one. Okay, let me stay on this. Please, let's understand that we come to an age where it's complex, but there are a lot of ethical issues. There are ethical landmines. And so it is not only as simple as saying that make a choice to actively understand, but there are ethical considerations. And this last actionable insight, please go to the last slide, is to the policymakers. Last slide. Okay. The policymakers must actually understand that we're in an age where many of these conversations has been outsourced in a way that we think IT is technical. And so we all ship it to some technical people. But what it takes, if you take ISO 27001, which is information security out, the technical controls is actually 35 out of 94. A lot of what is required for somebody to be security optimum is actually not exactly technology, right? And so my last one is that let's build a governance around these things, policies around these things, that thinks about the culture in a way that helps us understand risk and ownership. Please, the last slide. I'm done. Last slide. So my name, again, is Inshiraba. Last slide. Inshiraba Yao Sompa Ochre. Thank you for the opportunity, Sir Richard. I do not take it for granted. I'm happy to engage after here. Inshiraba Yao Sompa Ochre. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a world where terms and conditions could be read and you're advised whether to agree or not without you doing the reading. After all, we're in the age of AI. Imagine a world in which there's no 419. Imagine a Ghana with PayPal and not having to fill plenty forms when you go to MTN office or the bank or an embassy when they need to capture your biodata. A world of trust, a world of convenience. Imagine a world like that. And that's what this whole conversation has been about. It has been a pleasure being your MC for the National ICT Week, Day 3. My name is and will forever be Papa Kest, convener Tech Connect. There's a conversation called The Big Conversation. Be a part of it. And please help me with a round of applause. Welcome our DG NITA so he gives us his closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Papa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for bearing with us. Mine is just to thank esteemed guest speakers who came with us, who came to be with us today. Our friends from eMudra who flew all the way from India, thank you for coming to help us with the conversation. Sure. Data protection, DPC for your cybersecurity. Inshiraba Sumpa, every time I hear this man talk, I get excited about technology. Inshiraba, thank you very much. And all of you for making time to be here. We've been talking about trust, and I just want you to just look on the screen. NITA can be trusted because we are certified in all these ISO certifications. So service management, business continuity, and then what's the last one, Ben? They are all there. The numbers are ISO 22, this. I don't want to even talk about it, but it's there. We want to let you know that NITA can be trusted, right? So on that note, I trust that the lunch can also be trusted. So let's go and have lunch. Thank you. Tomorrow is innovation. Please, let's come early because today we've delayed a little bit. By 10, we want to start. I know you have to go to your offices and do whatever you need to do, but tomorrow Google is here, and we have an interesting day tomorrow. So we look forward to seeing all of you. Be safe. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Educate us more. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Amen. May the great